Good morning, I'm Councillor Malcolm Clark and I am Chair of this committee. Welcome to the meeting of the Economy and Enterprise Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting taking place on the 30th of October, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to members, including the members of the Environment and Sustainable Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, who've been invited to attend for agenda item 6. I'd like to welcome officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. Just a reminder to members that the meeting will be broadcast live on the Council website via YouTube, and that any footage from the meeting could be used in subsequent media broadcasts. Moving into the agenda, item number 1, apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies, please?
We have apologies from Councillors Colt and Hawley and Pat Holding and Gordon Binney.
Thank you, Ian. Item number 2, substitute members. Do we have notification of any substitutes, please?
We have no substitute members, Chair.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of July 2020. That's pages 3 to 22 in your packs. Can we agree the minutes as a correct record? I've had no indication.
Chairman.
Thank you very much. I've had no indications of dissent, so we agree those as a true record. Moving on to agenda item number 4, which is declarations of interest. Does any member have any declarations that they'd like to make at this time? If members can be aware that you can make a declaration at the time, please do make them if you need to. Agenda item 5, items from co-opted members, if any.
None, Chair.
Thank you, Diane. And that moves us on to agenda item 6, which is the impact of COVID-19 on Regeneration, Economy and Growth Service, a report of the Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth. I'd like to welcome to the meeting for the first time our new Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, Amy Harhoff, who's going to present for us this morning. So welcome, Amy, and I'll hand over to you for your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here for my first meeting. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. We've got a few items on the agenda today which relate to the economic impact of COVID and the activity that's happening across the county to support the resilience and the recovery of the economy. I'm going to take you through what is the first item now to try and put across to members and to the audience some of the more strategic impacts and the sense in which the council is responding, and then that will follow with some more detailed updates around the Business Durham and around Visit Durham, which of course have been 2 critical areas as part of the recovery. The report itself in your pack covers 2 key areas essentially. We talk a bit about what regeneration, economy and growth as an area within the council is responsible for, and some of the activities and impacts on the business as part of the response to the pandemic. And then we talk a little bit more strategically about the impacts across the county itself and our activities to support that. I'll just move into the main presentation now. I think that probably the first thing to say at the outset before moving into the main report is that in essence this is at a point in time, and very much the pandemic itself, because of its relative volatility, makes our ability to respond to it quite different to anything that we've seen before. We've of course as an economy seen recessions, and that both structural and financial in the economy, whether that's been the decline of industry or financial markets. So to some extent we are used to responding to these challenges. However, what's clearly very, very different about the economic impact of the pandemic is that the underpinning reason for the challenges that we're now facing is a health crisis, and it's a health crisis which is yet to resolve. So that very much affects the way in which we can respond to it. In our report today, what we're looking for is to receive feedback in terms of the presentation of our report and the review that we present. But we probably very much welcome that we bring the recovery and the resilience of the economy as a regular item, as this will be something that moves over time. I'm just going to move in now to talking a little bit about the impact on some of the council services that are included within regeneration, economy and growth, and that covers 5 areas of the council fundamentally. It's our transport services, we have our culture and sport and tourism, which is clearly a very big area impacted by the pandemic, development and housing, our corporate property and land, and business Durham. And the report covers some fairly comprehensive information in terms of what's been happening in those areas, and I'm just going to briefly pick up some of the main points of that now and to help with managing the time. I think it's also important to just say at the outset that as well as those individual requirements, it's the way in which those different areas work together on the overarching response for the economy. So just moving forward then into the main report. So if we take transport services as probably a good example, obviously the impact on travel from the pandemic has been considerable. Overall, nationally, we've seen a 97% reduction in air travel. We've seen significant reductions in travel to work, and as a result of that, saw significant reductions in road travel. And of course, not just because of people travelling, but because of the guidance on public transport, we've seen significant reductions in public transport itself. And as we set out in the report, at the moment, we're operating at about 85 to 90% in terms of road travel. That sounds quite high, but that is a significant reduction overall when we consider the scale of some of those numbers, and particularly public transport, where we see that passenger transport is operating at about 55% of pre-COVID levels, so almost half, which is significant and is a reflection that people are travelling less, but of course that people are being deterred from non-essential journeys on public transport. And what we've probably seen in there is actually a number of people who do need to travel and might otherwise do on public transport are actually doing this via car instead, where they're able to do so. So there's a lot of work to manage and to support this, and across this service area have been responsible for working with our children's services to ensure that our children particularly could access travel to school. We have been responsible for developing emergency active travel members, which was a bid from central government which sought to introduce early measures which could encourage sustainable modes such as cycling. So quite a lot of activity in that area. We then move on to looking at our culture, sport and tourism area. Again, a lot of areas within that service impacted by the pandemic. So when we consider, for example, our leisure centres, which had to close at the start of the pandemic, with then gradual reopening as the restrictions released. A lot of activity there to consider how we reopen our leisure centres, to be able to do that safely, but ensure that we're still providing a good service for our residents. And also important to note in this service, particularly a number of the team who were part of that service were initially furloughed because of course those industries closed, and the team were very, very strong and very, very positive in quickly moving into different areas to support the response to the pandemic. For example, the community hub, and I would like to really commend the team that did that very, very quickly and responded, moving into different jobs to support the overall response to the pandemic. In this area particularly, and we've got another report on the agenda today, so I won't go through too much of the detail of that, but clearly the leisure, retail, cultural sector have been significantly affected by the pandemic, arguably the most affected because they are most impacted by the restrictions in play. And the team are working very, very closely across the county with our businesses affected in that area. As we move on then to development and housing, I think really, really important area, both in terms of the recovery itself with the investment work, ensuring that we've still managed to maintain and to continue things like our planning functions. We also look at our buildings and facilities. So as a council, of course, not only are we responsible for development and supporting external investment, but actually our own buildings, making sure that they are safe and keeping our employees well at work, and things that perhaps we'd have never considered we'd be doing before the pandemic. So within our asset services actually took responsibility for supporting the emergency provision of PPE to our care homes. I'll move on. Thank you, Sarah. And of course, just finally, we have another report on the agenda today, but Business Durham, critical area within regeneration and growth, who've been working tirelessly with our businesses to support those businesses who've been able to respond and to provide services as part of the pandemic, and particularly our manufacturers, but actually for a number of those businesses who've really faced quite significant challenges as a result of the pandemic. And you've received a report previously at Overview and Scrutiny, which talked about our very quick response as a council to support business grants, rates relief, and the Business Durham team have been absolutely integral to that as part of the council. So if we just move on then to the outside of the services within Reg today, and happy of course to take any detailed questions about what we're doing there. But when we look at the macro context, if you like, so what's actually happening to County Durham itself outside of the council, as I said at my introduction, it's a really challenging context in that we have a set of almost known unknowns, in that we know it's going to be a challenging time in the economy, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the numbers and the way in which our economy has been affected. But actually that hasn't settled yet, and I think we're clearly going into a period now into the winter as we see furlough end, as we see different mechanisms come into play to support that we may see further challenges within our economy, and particularly around unemployment. But if I just talk you through some of the numbers that we have, and the other thing I'd just like to flag for Overview and Scrutiny is what we don't have is perfect information. So some of the information comes out at different time frames and is done at a geographic level. What we're trying to do is to consolidate a picture for County Durham, so we can understand what the trends are, and we can then try and tailor our activity to support in the areas where we think are most vulnerable. But I've mentioned at the start, we clearly business grants as County Durham was a quick response. We overall delivered over £104 million out to over 9,500 businesses, and supported over a further 2,000 businesses with rate reductions. So that was really important at that time. We have had significant impacts. So as of July, there were almost 70,000 people furloughed within the economy in County Durham, and that's of a total 230,000 people who'd usually be employed. So that is a very significant number. Now, the furlough numbers don't actually go down to now a County Durham level, but what we do know is at the time where in the summer that number was 69,000, so that was about 30%. On average, the country nationally is at about 16%. So we could make an estimate of the numbers that exist across the county as of today and as of tomorrow, of course, the furlough scheme ends, and we know it's still a significant number, and a number that we of course concerned about, because for those industries that haven't been able to pick up because of the restrictions that make up a lot of that number, we may then see some of those individuals find themselves unemployed, and that's where I'll talk in a little bit about some of the resilience plans and the activity that we're undertaking as a council, where we have powers and capacity to do so to try and support people. The other thing that I think is really important to make members aware of is probably around the claimant count, which is a significant number. So within the report, we talk about the pre-COVID levels. So early March, we had just over 21,000 people who made up the claimant count across County Durham. Now, that isn't just full unemployment, because that will account for other benefits, but that number was 21,000 people who were claiming some level of support. and sorry, I'll just rewind there. Sorry, it was just over 13,000 in March, and what we saw then is that number increased to August to just over 21,000. So a 67% rise in the claimant count, a very significant number. And the other thing that we do know is that that number is disproportionate to young people. So in some areas we have seen an increase from a 6% claimant count of young people up to over 10%. And although those numbers sound quite low in relative terms, they're quite high numbers. And it's perhaps not surprising when we look at some of the sectors of the economy that have been most affected, that they may well be entry-level jobs and the sort of jobs that are often employed by young people. So it's really, really important when we look at what we're going to do as a council, and particularly what we're going to push for with central government, that we have young people at the heart of that activity. I'll move on to the next slide, if I may. There are, if you like, peaks in the clouds of this, and there are a number of areas that have actually grown in the pandemic, and probably the two that I would flag most notably today are house sales. So this is a little bit more anecdotal because we're currently gathering the evidence on this, but a lot of the feedback from housing from companies delivering homes is that actually sales are up. We know that the figures nationally are showing not only that sales have increased, but actually overall values in homes are higher. And I think that's a reflection of a number of things, such as the stamp duty, but also for people who are able to still invest, are probably putting a different focus on home and property than perhaps prior to the pandemic because of the amount of time that we now spend at home. But the other one that I really did want to flag, and actually with a real sense of pride on this, is being with our manufacturers. We have an incredibly strong manufacturing base in County Durham. It makes up over 26% of our economy in terms of GVA. And our manufacturers have responded to the pandemic in a number of ways. They are providing the beds for hospitals, hand sanitizer. One of our businesses indeed has the capability to manufacture some of the components for the potential vaccine. So I think for County Durham, not only is it important that those businesses have been able to see growth and indeed in some cases employ more people, but are actually also directly responsible for supporting the health response. And I think that's something that we should be incredibly proud of and supportive of for those businesses. I'll just move on. Thank you. So just in terms of looking at some of the main impacts for those sectors, and I'm conscious that we do have other detail on the agenda today, so I won't cover that off in too much detail. But clearly, as I said, retail, hospitality and culture significantly affected by the pandemic. Not only difficult economically, but very frustrating, I think, for those businesses who haven't been able to plan for reopening because of the challenges that exist with the restrictions. We know from surveys that a number of our hospitality businesses have struggled to open or have opened at reduced capacity, and as a result of that, economically are struggling. As we set out in the slides, you know, retail workers, for a significant number of those furloughed were of course in retail. That fell in August. But alongside this, we're also seeing an increase in the online offer, which is then reducing the demand for retail workers. So a really challenging sector. A mixed picture across our town centres. So Durham City has been particularly affected. So a number of businesses have closed in Durham City, currently operating at 70% of the capacity that it was this time last year. And this is quite consistent with the national picture. However, in other towns across the county, namely Bishop Auckland and Stanley, have returned to levels on their high streets which are quite consistent with the pre-pandemic levels. So it is a mixed picture, and I think more work for us to do to get underneath the detail there and understand what the reasons for that are in our different town centres, and then look at some of the available investments across the council and pushing nationally to ensure that we're able to support those areas that are both struggling and those areas that have managed to recover so they continue to do so. I'll move on, thank you. Again, we've touched on the visitor economy, and I mentioned some of the statistics that we have. So we do regular surveys with our visitor economy and have very, very close relationships. It's an incredibly important sector across County Durham, 11,000 people employed in this sector. It makes up a significant number of our economy. And as you can see there from the outline, 77% of businesses opened in the summer with reduced capacity. We need to review those numbers again, but we're not expecting it to have improved given the restrictions, and indeed are expecting that to potentially be a more challenging picture. And from the council's perspective, it's very important that we are ensuring that we push nationally to ensure that investment continues in that sector, and it continues in a way that ensures those businesses that were viable before can be there after the pandemic, and also that we ensure our own support is appropriately tailored to those sectors. I'll move on. And again, as I've already said, significant impact on transport. And actually, although at the moment the transport sector is supported by government grant to remain viable, the bus companies, the rail companies wouldn't be viable on their own at present. So that's something we need to continue to support and press for. Public transport's a relatively marginal industry in many parts and wouldn't operate viably at 50%. So it's really, really important that grant continues, because those bus services provide vital connections to people who most need them, and in an area like County Durham, where we do have a relatively low level of car ownership, are absolutely critical that they're part of the recovery. Thanks, Sarah. I'll move on. The last thing that I wanted to pick up today, we've included for you today just what is, I think, an emerging picture and something which will need to remain agile in the way in which the County Council promotes recovery. And what we've talked about is actually as much about resilience as it is recovery, but the two things that are, I think, inextricably linked. And the resilience is really about ensuring that we maintain what was a very strong base in County Durham prior to the pandemic, and we support it to grow as we will come out of the pandemic. And we suggested there are probably 4 key areas where we need to work tirelessly to ensure that resilience and then move into recovery at such times as we're able to do that. And that's around resilient businesses, people, our visitor economy, and our town centres as being the bedrock really of the County Durham economy. And we talk in the report, and I'll draw out a couple of examples of things that I think are absolutely critical to that. The other thing that I would highlight to Overview and Scrutiny is actually the importance of the work that was already in play by the council, and particularly some of our strategic investments that have put County Durham in a strong place, and as strong as we can be, to respond to the pandemic. So, for example, the very strong investment pipeline that exists in County Durham, over £3 billion of potential public and private investment in the county. We've continued to work to develop those as a council. So you will have seen recently at Cabinet last month the investment in the proposal for investment in council homes, which would deliver £70 million of investment into the economy. The towns and villages proposal, upward of £20 million in our economy, and all of these things, whilst they've been progressed and pushed forward as whilst the pandemic continues, were in play prior to that, and have put us in quite a strong position to be able to invest. And particularly for all of those investments, for those that are council investments, we've got a very, very strong track record on what we'd call community wealth building on social value. So we see upward of 60% of our investments that happen as the council do so within our local supply chain in County Durham. I'll move on and just talk briefly about some of the examples that exist, and then I'm conscious to make sure that I leave time for questions and scrutiny of this item. So if we look at our businesses, there's a lot of activity that's already been underway. I've mentioned the grant schemes, I've mentioned the business rate schemes. We've done other things, so we don't have obviously endless pots of money, but there are things we can do to help. So for example, last month we launched the business catalogue, which just set out in clear terms for businesses where all the different grants and supports are, because we're very conscious we're an SME economy. SMEs don't always have lots of time and resource, so just put in a one place information where businesses can access the support that's available was something that had been fed back to us as something that's really critical, and we've had really good feedback from businesses since launching that information. Health and wellbeing training hub, again, you know, a relatively small investment in financial terms, but absolutely critical to be able to support businesses to weather the real challenges that are taking place at the moment. We've continued with our ERDF programmes. We've continued with the investments I've said in our strategic sites. So for example, Net Park, really good example of an investment that's been underway for a number of years, is currently at capacity, so supports that overall resilience, but lots more to do. Working with people, so I talked earlier about the real effects on young people. So we've established youth hubs, particularly going to work hard to hone in and understand why those high unemployment areas are, and ensure that we can work with young people, but across the economy, to connect people with the opportunities that do exist and ensure that they have the skills in place to achieve those jobs. And we also work as part of our programme that we work with the Jobs Centre and other partners to make sure that where businesses are having to make staff redundant, that our rapid response team quickly are in place to support those people to look for alternatives and to make the connections between people and jobs. Town centres is an absolutely key priority. I've talked about I've mentioned the Towns and Villages Fund, but there are other activities underway. So for example, we have been putting bids of up to £50 million in over 2 bids for the High Street Fund and the Towns Fund, available centrally for Bishop Auckland, which would be a significant investment, and although that would happen in Bishop Auckland, would be a benefit across the county because of the scale of that investment. Supporting and understanding our vacant users to look at where we can change and support the high street to be agile in the current context. We talk about digital high street, investments in supporting super fast connections, are all activities which are in play and will be quite critical to the recovery and increased performance of our town centres. We do have an update on visitor economy later on the agenda, so I won't go into too much detail in there. But I think again this is a good example of where County Durham started in a reasonably strong position institutionally, because we have specific teams such as Visit County Durham who are there on the ground, know the businesses, have got long working relationships across the sector, and are able to not only understand those sectors but work closely with them. So I think really, Chair, what we're asking, as I say, over the Scrutiny today is to really feed back to us and question us on what you've heard today. And I very much welcome the opportunity, I think, to provide a regular update to Overview and Scrutiny on the impact of COVID on our economy and the Council's role in that response.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Amy. There's a lot of information there I know members will find extremely helpful. Members, please feel free to request to speak in the chat. We've got Councillors Bell, Tucker, Eddie Adam, Elizabeth Scott, and I believe Mr. Brian Avery has put his hand up. Ian, did you have your hand up briefly to speak?
No, Chair.
My apologies. Just before I bring Richard in, Rosemary, I see you waving. Are you wanting to be on the list? No problem. Richard Bell, please, for your comment and questions.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of comments, questions on town and village centres, probably mainly villages, really. At paragraph 29, you noted that the Community Economic Development team has seen a shift in its work from project oversight and physical delivery to retail business support, as on-site works were halted due to COVID-19, etc. So there's a lot of good schemes about in certain targeted areas. There's things called TBI, targeted business improvements, and there's county-wide schemes as well. Most of them have generally been time limited to like 1 or 2 financial years. And I suppose my plea is really, can you extend some of those time limits? Because certainly people are reporting back to me that it's very difficult to, with a quite buoyant sort of building, electrician, plumbing, decorating sector, everybody's very busy because they're doing a lot of work. All the people who aren't going on holiday are spending money on home improvements, as you've mentioned. Very difficult actually to get quotes in and get projects off the ground now. So it's not just the fact that COVID stopped people working, it's the fact that there's a huge bulge of work in that sector. And that means that those funds are in danger of running out of time, even though there's demand there. So I think, can you sort of like look at extending those TBI funds and possibly also extending them to like and shaping them for like the different offers of the hospitality sector now? So maybe pubs or hospitality venues we could do more for. I mentioned this at the AAP forum that Stuart Timmis did a presentation on a couple of weeks ago, going around the county at the moment, all the AAP forums, and you mentioned, Amy, the town and villages reserve, and I just wondered, is that it as far as consultation goes on how you're going to spend that 20 million town and villages reserve, or are you going to be taking in ideas from councillors or from other parties, and are you going to be reporting back to Scrutiny on how you plan to spend that town and villages reserve? Thanks, Chair.
Chair, would you like me to respond to Councillor Bell now, or would you like me to take a few more questions and respond to a few at the end?
We've got a few speakers just to move things on. I think that's probably a good idea. So I'll invite Tanya Tucker, and we'll have Eddie Adams' comments straight after, and then we'll let Amy respond to the issues. Tanya?
Morning, Chair. Tanya Tucker, Woodhouse Close Division, Bishop Auckland. Amy, excellent report, lots of good work going on. I've just got one query. We've got a lot of investment in the area, particularly the very large investment at Integra 61 with Amazon. One of the things that's come to light in my area, in my ward, is that several of my young people applied for jobs and were successful, but when they work night shift they can't get to work. I've got a number of young people. I've got a 17-year-old who's actually walking from sort of just outside of Bishop Auckland to Bourburn to get to work because there's no public transport, and under 25s either don't have the resources for a car, haven't learned to drive because they can't afford it yet. I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of investment in infrastructure in that area, but what about public transport for shift work and our young people? Because with the winter coming, we can't expect these kids to walk. It's not feasible. So is there any plans to put investment into public transport so that people can actually get to these new employers and be able to be fully functioning, employed adults in our communities? Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Tanya. Eddie, can we have your questions and comments, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thank you, Amy, for your report. Really extensive and clearly indicates the amount of and the level of work that's going on behind the scenes and within County Durham to support a huge range of businesses in our area. That said, you didn't really focus anything on in terms of the small and medium-sized enterprises, of which are key within County Durham, especially the self-employed. What impact has there been in terms of the self-employed in our area, and what support has been taken up by our existing businesses? Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Amy.
Thanks, Eddie. Amy, we'll give you a chance to respond to those, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for your questions and comments. So to the first point for Councillor Bell, in terms of extending the time limit, where funds are directly in the council's control, so for example, Councillor Bell, if you talk about towns and villages, that's something that we can always keep under review and respond to the needs of businesses. And I think Councillor Bell raises an excellent point that actually one of the challenges at the moment is the ability to spend often within the timescales that we're given. In some cases where that funding isn't from County Durham, and particularly where it's from central government, we do have very, very tight timescales on funding. So for example, a number of the funds that came out in the pandemic, for example, some of the infrastructure funding had to be spent in 6 months, and that wasn't negotiable. So I think the answer to that is absolutely where we have discretion over that as a council. We will keep that under review pragmatically. Where we don't, it's a bit more of a challenge. In terms of the towns and villages consultation, as Councillor Bell rightly notes, we have been attending all of the AAPs. Currently, what's happened is we've done a strategic overview to ensure that the AAPs have visibility of the process. There's then to follow with that a more detailed workshop so that each AAP has time to talk in a bit more detail about their area and aspirations for the funding. And then what we've committed to is to bring back a report to Cabinet in the new year, which will set out the proposals for the initial programme of investment for that funding. So the answer to that, Councillor, is yes, absolutely. There's more time, and that isn't the end of the process. It was an initial engagement. In terms of Integra 61, and really appreciate the question there from Tanya. We're currently in negotiations with Amazon to look at them providing, if you like, the supporting the public transport services for the shift patterns whereby they're not covered by the normal access times of public transport services. So we're currently in those discussions, and I will take the action to provide you with an update on the detail of that. But it's absolutely right, and it's part of the process that we go through to make sure that actually the people who get the opportunities can access them and can do so safely with transport. And and in terms of the SME question, it's a really important point, and actually would welcome a more detailed update on this issue. We've obviously got over almost 11,000 SMEs across the county. It's a big number. What we don't have is a detailed breakdown as to the different scales of businesses that have been impacted on. But I think that's something that, as I mentioned at the start, we need to start looking into a lot more detailed analysis. That I think that's certainly something I could take the action to and would be keen to focus on.
Thank you very much, Amy. We'll take 3 more comments and questions, starting with Councillor Elizabeth Scott, please.
Hi, morning. Thank you, Chair. My question relates to town centres and businesses. Really, you talked about the fact that not everybody has been hit equally. Some town centres have fared better than others. Some business sectors have fared better than others. How will we prioritise our help? That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Rosemary Morris next, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's really a question about the resilience plan that you spoke about, Amy, and in particular the skills element of it, the skilling up of people, and particularly young people. A lot of what you've got there, very laudable, but it's been going on for some time. And given that we really are starting from a low base to get even back to where we were, what are the kind of skills that you're going to be working with these young people on? What are the groups that you've identified to help them going to get in the way of training to make sure that they're into the right pathways to actually gain employment. Just one example, I was listening to something yesterday, and of all the countries, the only country in the world that's actually going to show growth after this pandemic is China. And I think it's maybe important that they are looking at massive digital, massive climate and environmental jobs, of which there are plentiful. Are we going to do that?
Thank you, Rosemary, for that question and comments. Councillor Brian Avery.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Yes, very interesting report, Amy, and also a lot of very interesting questions from members. What I would like to say, or to praise actually, is the leisure centre staff, especially at the leisure centre which I attend regularly, which is Newton Aycliffe. Can I say to Amy that the staff look after the place absolutely marvellously. Cleanliness is second to none. They sanitize the gym equipment regularly, and the members do as well. One thing that is a little bit disturbing recently, over the last couple of weeks, let's say, the members seem to be, or the people don't seem to be coming back like I thought they might. I was just wondering, is there anything we can do to try to encourage the old members to return and let them know just how well we are looking after the centre? Especially, I suppose we're looking after them all, but I only go to Newton Aycliffe. So could you do that? Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, Amy, over to you for your responses.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'll do my best. So I think firstly to Councillor Scott, it's a really good point, and I mentioned in my presentation, I think that the next step is to understand at each town level what the drivers have been for those declines. So I think particularly in the case of Durham, I know we've highlighted there's been a number of losses to the high street. So I think we need to understand why. I think we need to engage with the businesses, and then I absolutely think, of course, from a council perspective, where it's in the bounds of the priorities and the investments that we have, we need to look at how we can support. And I also think there's a significant job to do on town centres to ensure that we are putting a very, very strong case to the government, because I think the investment that we need will be potentially of a quite significant level, which might be out of the bounds of what the county council has. So I think to answer the question, yes, we absolutely need to look at the priorities for those areas and understand what the reasons for that decline have been and whether it's something that we can support to correct. I really welcome the comments from Rosemary regarding the skills. I think it's an absolutely important point, and I completely agree. I think those focus areas around digital, climate change, I would also stress our strengths in manufacturing and ensuring that our young people have the skills to access those jobs. So as part of the work that we'll be doing in the next phase, we'll be looking at, within the confines of the rules that we have around skills funding, how can we make sure those packages are actually tailored to what young people need to be able to access jobs. And thank you firstly to Councillor Avery, much appreciated. The team will really appreciate your comments, so thank you, and so do I. In terms of capacity, we are running across our leisure centre portfolio at between 60 and 70%, and that's partly as a result of demand, but it's also partly of, obviously, we've got restricted use now, as we've had to obviously do an awful lot to ensure the social distancing across the centres. It is a really fine balance between encouraging people to use our facilities, which is important for people, for communities, and also really important for the viability of the centres with the public health message. And we do continue to put out communications regularly to strike that balance to encourage in usage. But also balancing the demand at the centres. But I'm more than happy to review that and look at it and come back at a later date with a more specific update on leisure.
Thank you. We have 3 more people registered to speak, so we'll take them together, starting with Tom Bolton, please.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Thanks for the opportunity to attend the meeting. I'm a co-opted member of the Environment Scrutiny Committee. I wanted to ask Amy, I don't know whether I've jumped the gun on this, because I know she mentioned there's a report on the visitor economy. And I think one thing that's been highlighted during the pandemic and the lockdown are the opportunities for people to actually get out from the homes and to get air and exercise. I visit Seaham fairly regularly. I've got family who live there, and I've noticed a definite upturn in the number of visitors who can go to places like the Durham coast and enjoy the outdoors safely. And obviously we've got other areas like Teesdale, Weardale. I just wonder, in terms of working with Visit Durham and our other partners, whether we're looking at the opportunities to actually do more to sell the assets that we have, the open countryside and places that people can come to during the pandemic. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Tom, and also very welcome to return. I'm glad you came. Next speaker is Jim Atkinson, please.
Hi, good morning. This is Jim Atkinson from Aycliffe East. Thanks very much for the presentation, Amy. It was very good again, and loads and loads of information, which brings me to the question I want to ask, really. I'm getting phone calls from contractors and such like who find the information, the COVID information, very, very useful, but it's changing all the time. A bit of a problem is the amount of information. I was wondering if we have a link, or if we have, or we could have a link, which would sort of summarise the information a bit better, because these people don't have a lot of time for shed loads of reading. I mean, we get shed loads of reading, and it takes a long, long time to digest it properly. So any kind of method that could get them into the information as quickly as they possibly can would be absolutely wonderful. If you could think that one, or give us some information on that, I'd appreciate that. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. And lastly, we have Fraser Tinsley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions just to bring up. First one is on buses. I know that there was a slide there showing 50% reduction in usage across the county, which it strikes me that level of usage, these are potentially non-viable businesses, and we know that we're relying on a handful of bus operators, Go Ahead, Arriva, Scarlet Band, etc. And it's just a case of what work are we doing with those operators now on a day-to-day level, just to see how we can help. And the other one is, any more strategic work doing around issues such as potential for quality contracts and looking at a re-regulation of the industry. We've seen the renationalisation of the train industry effectively, and is that something that we're preparing for with the bus industry? Because I think it is potentially on the cards. The second one is a point around, there was a recent report by the House of Commons Library on regional economic indicators, and that showed that County Durham had taken a 12% hit to its GVA as a result of COVID over this year. And that's worrying enough, but the real worry is that it doesn't see ourselves recovering to Q4 2019 GVA until 2030. And I just would like Amy's views as to if she thinks that's a reasonable assessment of where we're going to be. Are we looking at a lost decade here? And thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Fraser. I don't have anyone else registered to speak, so following Amy's comments here, we'll move the agenda on. But Amy, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And in terms of the question from Tom, I'll answer that, but I'll also just pause to see if Michelle Gorman would like to come in on anything I've said, because I know we've got Michelle on the meeting today, who's covering the more detailed item on this later. But I think the answer to that, Tom, is absolutely. And I think one of the great things about County Durham has been just how many fantastic assets that we have across the county that we've still been able to access in the pandemic, whether that's a visit to High Force or as you say, the beach in Seaham, and incredibly privileged to have that. And we've struck a balance really to encourage visitors safely, but actually to maximise the potential to both encourage our own residents to visit our assets, but also encourage staycations, which was a campaign that we ran across the summer. So the answer to that is yes, absolutely. The caveat that I'd make to that at the moment is, and it links to my earlier point about how we're always responding to the health guidance. Of course, we are constantly under review for the latest guidance from government, for example, in terms of movement. So, for example, the way in which people can move between areas. So we have to have a very, very careful communications campaign, because it may well be that something we do with the best of intent one week becomes actually out of kilter the next week. So the answer is yes, but it's not completely straightforward. I will just quickly pause to check if Michelle wants to come in. Otherwise, I think Michelle will probably pick up anything I've missed there in the item we've got later on the agenda. Welcome the point from Jim about the communications. There is an awful lot of information. There's actually an awful lot of information for us as a council to absorb, and it happens very, very quickly. We do work very hard to try and put out the messages coherently, but welcome any feedback on that. It's something we're constantly reviewing. So very happy to perhaps have a conversation about this and ensure that we are doing the best that we can in terms of communications. And then just a couple of questions from Councillor Tinsley then, really welcome, quite a strategic nature there. On the specific of buses, yes, we've got a very, very close relationship with our bus operators in County Durham, and County Durham Council is actually responsible for the commission of where we subsidise services, and that's a little bit different. Both ourselves and Northumbria do that, whereas for the rest of the North East, that's actually done by Nexus. So we are able to do that more directly. We do have that close relationship. We work to ensure that we've got as much network and service cover as we can have within the confines of the funding, and it's a challenge that we're constantly aware of at the moment, and it's vitally important that we do maintain that funding, because although it's a subsidised service, it's obviously quite a critical service. As we know, roughly one in three of our population don't have access to a car. At the strategic level, in terms of regulation of the bus services, well, we continue to work with our operators to make sure that the services are good across the county and have some quite strong satisfaction levels on that. So overall satisfaction levels on public transport are about 90% across the county. There aren't any specific plans in play across the county at the moment to look at re-regulation, although of course we do have the Bus Reform Act that allows under certain circumstances for those things to be looked at, but it's not an open and active review that we're undertaking at the moment. And just finally then, in terms of the final question, and it's a really interesting point around the recovery, and 12% is a significant number. I think, as with anything at the moment, you can have credible estimates, but actually we are all still dealing with the fallout of this. So I think we should take that estimate seriously. I think we continue to keep that under review and need to look at some more specific work for County Durham that perhaps understands a lot more about the local. And I think we have to just continue to push hard to ensure that it isn't 2030 when the economy returns to 2019 level. And I think we need to work belt and braces to ensure that doesn't happen. But it is a realistic concern, and that will have significant impacts over effectively the next business cycle if that is the case.
Thank you very much, Amy, and thank you for attending this morning. Members, the recommendations on the report is that we A, consider and comment on the information provided in the report and presentation, which we've done, and B, to receive a further progress report detailing the impact of COVID-19 on key areas of the service grouping at a future meeting within our work programme. Can I also take this opportunity as the chair, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone, to thank again the committee, on behalf of the committee, to DCC staff and partners who are providing and delivering ongoing support to residents and businesses of County Durham during this pandemic. We'll move on now to item 7, which is the Business Durham progress update, a report of the Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth. That's on pages 51 to 68 of your packs if you want to follow the slides. and the presentation is by the Interim Managing Director of Business Durham, Sarah Slavin. So I'd like to invite Sarah to present to us, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you. I'll just put up my presentation. Just bear with me a second while I make sure that's loaded. Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to come along and present to you this morning. This is the sort of annual performance review presentation that I would normally come and provide to you on the work that Business Durham has been doing over the course of the last year. But also, given the presentation that we've just been listening to, I'm going to provide you with a brief update on some of the work that Business Durham's been doing to support businesses over the last 6 months. Just starting then to talk about the performance of Business Durham last year. Seems like a long time ago now, 2019-20. Just to highlight some of the information that's provided to you in the report today around the performance against targets. I think it was another good year for Business Durham in terms of delivering against the targets. The majority of targets set for the year were met or exceeded, and I just wanted to highlight some of those for you this morning, particularly in relation to our occupancy of the portfolio of property that we manage for the council. As you'll be aware, the sort of rental income that we generate from the property portfolio contributes to and funds the rest of the services that Business Durham provides to support businesses in the county. And last year, we had one of our highest levels of occupancy, exceeding the target at which was 85%, and we came in at 86% overall. And that was made up of particularly increases in occupancy at Net Park and in our office portfolio. Our industrial units traditionally are always very popular and tend to always operate at a kind of 90% plus occupancy level. But it was great to see that both at Net Park and in our offices we had increased occupancy during the year. And as a result of the work that we did as Business Durham in supporting businesses last year, we created or safeguarded over 2,000 jobs in the county, and the proportions there tend to be around 40% of the jobs were new jobs created and 60% were jobs safeguarded in businesses that we'd worked to support during the year. And that results in an impact on GVA of £62 million in relation to those jobs that were supported through our work. Overall, we engaged with over 1,000 businesses, 1,040 businesses across the county during the year, and 403 of those were intensively assisted. So that's just under 40% of all those businesses we engaged with. We were providing with intensive assistance, so that was significant number of hours of support, or taking them, supporting them with a major project that was going to really take their business forward in terms of where they wanted to go in expansion opportunities, new markets, etc. And we secured or helped businesses to secure over £3 million of investment through the Finance Durham Fund, through the satellite applications catapult at Net Park, and through some of our grant programmes, Digital Drive County Durham and the County Durham Growth Fund. Last year, it seems hard to remember now, but at this time last year, the key consideration on all our minds was obviously Brexit, and Brexit definitely had an impact on the inward investment work that we did last year. So although we didn't quite hit our target for inward investors, we had 8 against a target of 10, and it was fair to say that all of those were smaller inward investments. Some of the larger projects that we had in the pipeline were taking a long time to make a decision, and didn't come to fruition, often driven by concerns around the impact of Brexit. And we had we secured just under £1 million worth of new contracts for programmes that we were going to deliver as Business Durham, and that covered the new Durham Ambitious Business Starts programme, the extension to our satellite applications centre of excellence, and also the key account management programme that we deliver for the Northern Powerhouse. But also we put bids in last year for a further £7 million worth of contracts, which I'm pleased to say have all been approved since the start of this financial year. It was the first year of our Durham City Incubator programme, which supports businesses to start up in Durham, with a particular emphasis on graduates, encouraging graduates from Durham University, New College Durham and other young people to start their businesses in the county, and we supported 16 to start up last year. And finally, we engaged over 2,500 people in enterprise and STEM activities last year, which included our annual enterprise competition, Future Business Magnates, which I know the committee's heard about in the past. We also provided our enterprise experience, which is called FBM Freshers, to 6 schools for their Year 7 pupils. And we also had a number of outreach programmes at Net Park to encourage young people to look at the job opportunities there by some of the companies there. And a really interesting one actually as well, which was a combination of enterprise and language skills, where we worked with the County Council's International Office to engage 14 teams from across 10 schools of young people who were excelling in language skills, so linguists, but also to develop a business idea focusing on opportunities in the space sector, and they had to actually present their business idea in a foreign language. So a really interesting mix of kind of language skills and how that can be brought into enterprise and business. Just a couple of other things I wanted to, or 3 other things I wanted to highlight for you about activity that went on last year in particular. Jade Business Park, which is just next to Dalton Park in the east of the county at Merton. The council made a major investment to fund 155,000 square feet of speculative industrial units at Jade Business Park. The business park benefits from enterprise zone status, and we received some funding from the North East LEP to develop the infrastructure on the site. And we've worked in partnership with a private sector developer called Highbridge, who you may know was the company behind the development of Cobalt up at North Tyneside. And we managed to secure a pre-let on the units before they were built to Sumitomo Electric Wiring Systems, who are a supplier to Nissan. And they took the largest unit. And since the units were completed in August, we've got strong interest on 4 out of the 6 remaining units. So obviously it's a great location there with easy access to the A19 north and south. So quite an exciting project to be involved in, and really good to see how the interest that we're getting really in that new high quality industrial space that we've provided. Very much aimed at companies in the distribution, technology and advanced manufacturing sectors. I know something that this committee's been interested in previous presentations around ERDF funding, and last year was the last opportunity for us to actually bid into the ring-fenced pot of funding available for County Durham as a result of us having our transition area status. So we felt it was really important to maximise the programmes and the support that we could get from ERDF for our businesses in the county. So during the course of the year, we put in bids to extend the existing programmes that we had that were proving to be successful, and this is really about getting as much as we can out of that European funding while it's available, and making sure that that's going to support our businesses in things that are actually that they need and that are helping them to take forward their plans. So the Digital Drive County Durham programme is the one where we provide support to businesses to look at how digital technology can improve their productivity. And, you know, picking up on Rosemary's comment earlier, really critical that and the COVID pandemic has also demonstrated this, that businesses, technology and being able to use that in business is really going to be critical to business survival in the future and sustainability. So it's great to see that we've already been able to help over 500 businesses through the Digital Drive County Durham programme. And the benefit I feel of this programme is that it provides advice and support for businesses who don't know where to start. They want to do something with digital technology in their business, but they don't know where to start. So it provides that advice and support, but then importantly it provides a grant to enable them to then implement what they've found out, what they've learned within their business. And so far through the programme, we've given out over 260 grants and totalling over £889,000. And so it's great that we've been able to secure further ERDF funding to enable that programme to run through till June 2023. So that's really going to provide a lot more support to businesses in the county. The County Durham Growth Fund, again, it feels like it's been around longer than it has, but it actually was approved in April 2019. So it's just been running for 18 months now. And this programme we're really quite proud of, because we were the first area of the North East to actually apply for ERDF funding to have a scheme of this kind. It's a capital grant scheme, so companies that are investing significant capital expenditure in expanding or improving their premises, or in a big piece of capital equipment, so they need to be spending at least £100,000, and this provides a grant towards that. And very often the grant actually helps to de-risk the proposition for the business, to make the difference between whether they go ahead or not. So we were pleased to be the first area to sort of put this forward and prove that ERDF funding could be attracted for this kind of scheme. And since then, other parts of the North East have followed our lead and developed similar sort of schemes for their areas. And so far, 12 businesses have been supported with over 400 jobs forecast as a result of those grants, and we've got another 14 in the pipeline there. Durham Business Opportunities Programme, that's our ERDF programme that's been running for longest so far, and that one again picks up on one of the questions previously around how do we help businesses access the support that's available and find their way through what can be a minefield of information. And that's really the role of our Durham Business Opportunities Programme, is to actually help businesses that just haven't dipped their toe in the water before in taking up support, and make sure that they are signposted to what's really going to be the right support for them, help them find their way through that maze, but also to particularly focus on where it can help them with new opportunities. So where there might be a particular sector opportunity, and a good example of that is one of the strands that we've got running at the moment, which is to help County Durham businesses that would like to get into the construction supply chain with support about how they can, what opportunities there are for them and how they can go about doing that. And we were pleased that we had an interim evaluation done on the first phase of the programme, and we got positive results, with 86% of the businesses that had been supported rating the support they'd had as good or very good. And also one of the findings of the interim evaluation was that for every £1 spent of public money on the programme, it had generated a net £2.28 pounds of GVA for the economy. So in other words, good value for money. And the fourth area of the ERDF programmes is our Durham City Incubator project, which I mentioned earlier, which we do in partnership with Durham University and New College Durham. So it was quite an important year last year, really, just to make sure that we secured future funding for all of those programmes, and I'm pleased to say that all of those will be running through until June 2023 now, so that we can really make the most of that support for our business community. And the final thing just to highlight in terms of activities last year was the trade mission to South Africa that Business Durham led, with support from the Department for International Trade. We took across to South Africa the largest delegation from the North East to date, 15 companies from across the region, including 6 from County Durham. And really pleasingly, what was generated as a result of that trade mission was over £500,000 worth of contracts generated as a result of the connections and links made during the visit. And we're building some really good relationships with the organisations and businesses out in South Africa, particularly in the Durban area, but also, which is part of KwaZulu-Natal region, but also in Johannesburg, and a good strong relationship with the Department for International Trade colleagues out there in South Africa. And as a result of that, the chairman of the council was invited to attend the South Africa Investment Conference last November. in Johannesburg, and also in September we held a virtual trade mission because we had planned to host a visit from a delegation from South Africa. Clearly that's not been possible because of the COVID pandemic, so we hosted a virtual mission in September which 80 companies participated in, and we've got a return virtual mission taking place on the 5th of November, which is for companies from the northeast to showcase them, to find out about opportunities in South Africa. So I'll move on then. Those are the kind of just highlights that I wanted to draw to your attention of the work that we were doing almost really pre-COVID. And then just to finish on a few of the highlights, or sorry, not highlights, but a few of the activities that we've been doing to support businesses since the impact of COVID. And obviously you've had some detail of that already from Amy's presentation this morning. So I just wanted to pick up a few things specifically in relation to Business Durham's work. I think it's important to note that we're still unsure of what the overall impact is going to be on, for example, our premises. But to date, our occupancy levels across our portfolio continue to hold up well. So we're running at the moment at 92% occupancy across the Business Durham portfolio, and in particular, we continue to see a lot of demand at Net Park, given the nature of the work that companies do there. So some of that has been driven by companies on the park taking additional space, and some of it's being driven by new companies coming along to take space at Net Park. But we're very conscious that it is still early days in terms of the impact, and we are starting to see some companies who have offices consider whether they'll still need perhaps an office of the same size that they've had in the past, and we'll have to keep an eye on how that plays out over the rest of the year. Importantly, I think just picking up on the discussion earlier, and Amy referenced that there are sectors of the economy that are seeing opportunities to expand, and I was visiting a manufacturing company on Monday, a metal fabrication company, who said they've actually had one of their best years this year, ironically. So I think it's really important that we don't see it just as being doom and gloom. I guess that we also have some confidence that there are businesses who are doing well, and there are opportunities, and particularly there are jobs being created. And one of the things that we're trying to do as Business Durham is to make sure that we promote those positive stories about businesses. So we have on our website regular news articles about the companies that are growing, expanding, doing well, and if you have a look at those, there's some really interesting stories that kind of give you a bit of hope for the future, really, about the companies that we've got in the county and the great things that they're doing there, and those that are actually creating jobs, job opportunities, recognising that some sectors are struggling, and people will be losing jobs as well. Ongoing work that we're doing, Amy referenced the business support brochure, which we've pulled together to try and make sure that companies are aware of what is out there that can help them. And clearly a lot of the work that my team do is talking to businesses on a daily basis to connect them with advice. And in relation to the point that Jim Atkinson raised earlier, if there are businesses who are struggling to work their way through that information, please do give my team a call, and that's what we're there for, and we can help hopefully pinpoint what's the latest information that they need and what's relevant to them, because recognise that different businesses and different pieces of the information are more relevant to them than others. One of the things that we've been doing recently is that we've been reaching out to companies that support with business restructuring, recognising that when you have a recession, there will always be companies that end up having to go into administration or sadly go out of business. And one of the things we want to make sure is that the firms that support businesses in these difficult times are aware of the role of Business Durham, they're aware of what Durham County Council has to offer to support businesses, to make sure that that's factored into their to the advice that they're giving to companies when they're restructuring. We've had a really good response from that, and we've got a number of meetings organised with those restructuring and insolvency practitioner firms over the coming months to build that relationship. and in particular to make sure that they're aware that where the worst comes to the worst and we can't support the business to retain, that they know of the rapid response service that is available for employees that are losing their jobs. And as part of that rapid response service, one of the key things that we do is to try and ensure that where we're aware of companies that are recruiting in the county, that the those opportunities are provided to the so we have had situations where people haven't actually even hit the unemployment register because they've been able to provide their CVs and managed to secure alternative employment in other companies that are recruiting, and obviously that's a really positive outcome for everyone. And on the startup side, we're very conscious that a lot of people will be thinking about potentially starting a business as a response to being made redundant, and we're doing a lot of work with the other providers of startup support in the county, for example the enterprise agencies, to make sure we've got capacity to support with that. And we're developing a startup portal that will showcase in one place all of the support that's available with the people starting a business. So we're quite excited about that. I think that will be a really good service to have available. And just to finish on a positive note, I guess that, you know, one of our key roles as Business Durham is to be looking at what are the future opportunities for the county to enable our economy to continue to grow and be strong. So Amy referenced in her presentation Net Park, and we're doing some work there to open up opportunities on phase 3 at Net Park, particularly for companies on the park who are growing and are now ready to commercialise the research that they've been doing. We're also looking at how we can find future opportunities through innovation work, and with particular focus on opportunities in the space sector and opportunities arising from satellite applications. We have a growing cluster in the county of companies that are involved in that sector, and again some really exciting opportunities. And given our strong manufacturing base, we have skills and assets in the county and the region that could be put to good use in that sector. So we're looking at how we can encourage companies to get involved in that and understand what those opportunities are. And we're continuing to work on inward investors as well, and in order to bring more companies into the county. Now that we've got a number of strategic sites available, we need to make sure that we're generating interest from businesses, and we have got some inquiries starting to pick up now on the inward investment side. So I guess it's really important that for us as priorities as Business Durham this year, it's twofold. It's about supporting the businesses we've got through this, you know, very difficult times, but also keeping our eye on where those future opportunities are and making sure that we're doing what we can to prepare businesses and engage them with those. Okay, and I'll be happy to take any questions from the committee on the report.
Thanks, Sarah. I think that's front and centre to what you're doing. Business Durham, so thank you. Get rid of echo, buddy. I don't know who it is. Right, I've got 3 councillors wishing to speak, and I'll take all of your comments concurrently, and then Sarah can comment as soon as you're done. Starting with Tanya Tucker, please.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Sarah. Really comprehensive report, and there's a lot of good work going on in there. My question is around the confidence in the enquiries that you're receiving from businesses to invest in County Durham, and the capacity that we've got at current. You said 92% occupancy at present across the Business Durham sector. The new developments, especially Jade, Integra 61, and the proposal for Akeley Heads, I'm just wondering what your level of confidence and the level of inquiry is in those areas, particularly because our development partner that you mentioned for Jade was involved in cobalt, and I know personally that there is a level of empty units across cobalt that have never managed to be let, and that's a worry, especially given the current circumstances. So I'd like some assurance, I suppose I'm looking for, as to what your level of confidence is that you can turn the inquiry into an actual company coming into Durham and investing in the opportunities that we have available. That's my question. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Tanya. I'll take Fraser and Paul Sexton, and then we'll give Sarah the opportunity to comment on those three. And then we've got Jim Atkinson as well at the moment. Next is Fraser, please.
Thank you, Chair. We can see from the presentation how important European structural funding has been to supporting businesses, ERDF funding in particular. And my question is, we've only got 30 months of this left with the projects that we've had presented to us today. What evidence is there that London is going to replace Brussels in terms of funding us? I know we have something called a Shared Prosperity Fund, or is that actually happening? Are we seeing evidence? Are we now bidding into initiatives as part of that that's going to replace the European Structural Fund? And the other thing is as well, it's not just about replacing what we've had. I think we must remember that we've been a transition area under the past period of European funding, which means we had GDP in this region of between 75% and 90% of the European average. Unfortunately, heading forward, we would have fallen below that to less than 75% of European funding, which meant that we've got a lot more European money than we had over the past period. So is there any evidence that we're seeing that we not only are London going to replace what we got, but they would have replaced what we would have got had we stayed a member of the European Union? Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Fraser. And Paul Sexton, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Paul Sexton, County Councillor for Chester Street South. I'd just like to thank both Sarah and Amy for the presentations. It's a very difficult time to plan anything, but you know, during a pandemic where the variables are constantly changing, I really appreciate everyone's efforts, and I'll watch with interest and hope we manage to be successful in whatever we do. I'd just really like to, based on that context, I'd really just like to ask you, with a person with a planning background, how difficult or easy is it for you to change your strategies based on the data that you get in? So you're on a particular trajectory at this moment in time and a particular plan, but obviously there's time and investment in that. How easy is it for you to change strategy to optimize your efforts in a very, very difficult environment?
Thank you very much, Paul. Sarah, do you want to comment on those three queries?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So starting with Tanya's question around level of confidence and assurance, I guess what I would say is that in terms of Jade Business Park in Integra Forest Park, what we've got there is a strategic sites that are very much aimed at providing industrial capacity, you know, industrial units for manufacturing companies. I think the issues, you know, we're all aware of the issues at Cobalt and the other enterprise zones providing office space have had. They can be very difficult to fill those, but we've the developments that we've got in the county are aimed at are very much aimed at, you know, what's our strength in terms of manufacturing sector, and that links to the kind of inward investment inquiries that we're getting. So I know that we've got inquiries for Jade that are very much around that kind of, you know, manufacturing distribution, and so I have more confidence that that we will see those. I mean, you know, you can never be certain that you're going to get everyone that's in your pipeline, but I have a level of confidence because those are activities that have to be done somewhere. They need premises, they need large premises, and they have to. They're not the sort of thing that businesses can just, you know, do from home, if you like. And often it's around being able to provide that that good offer in terms of property first. Have we got the right property for them? But then also the other support. You know, have we got the right skills in the workforce? And have we got a financial package that supports that? And given that we've got things like our County Durham Growth Fund that can help and inward investor who's looking to take a unit, they can also get a grant towards perhaps the capital, equipment that they're putting in there. So that helps us, present ourselves in a as being kind of on the short list, at least for the areas that they're looking at. I can never give you a 100% guarantee, but I am reasonably confident that we will, just based on the kind of inquiries that we're getting, that we will see businesses coming forward. And it does always take a few years as well. I think that would be the thing that I would say. You don't fill the units that you provide instantly, but at the same time you generate far more serious inquiries when you've actually got units there that they can see, and they know, rather than just showing an empty site, which could be sometime in the future. So I think we're positioned at the moment in the county with a good offer and tangible evidence that we've got properties that would be of interest. So that's I guess the reassurance that I can give you as far as that is concerned at the moment. And I think it's our job, I guess, to try and be optimistic and to kind of try and spread some of that confidence to encourage companies to look at County Durham seriously. In relation to the European Structural Fund comment, I think it's fair to say that we haven't got any guarantees at the moment that London will replace the funding that we've had from Europe. I think there was a lot of hope that we were going to hear something from the government in the comprehensive spending review that was expected. Obviously, what's been happening with the pandemic has affected all of that. So we still don't have any visibility really about what might replace European structural funds and whether that will be the level that we've benefited from in the county in the past, which is a level that we've needed, as you point out, to address the challenges that we've got to tackle within the economy. I think what we felt was important was to be able to demonstrate that we'd made best use of the funding that has been available to date. So the last thing we wanted to do was to say, well, we had transition area status, but we didn't actually put that to good effect and make a difference. So we've really focused on trying to make sure we can demonstrate how the funding we've had has been used and prove that it's made a difference in terms of jobs created, productivity in our businesses, because I think that's important in saying, look, you can trust us. We've got a track record. If you give us this level of funding in the future, this is what we'll do with it, which will make a real difference to our economy. So that's a kind of a key priority for us for the next 13 months while we have got this funding available, is to demonstrate that we are making really good use of it and that it is making a difference. And I think that will be an important part of our case to government in terms of saying you need to continue to provide this funding because we can be trusted with it, and this is what it's doing for us, and this is the difference that it's going to make to address the challenges that we have. And then the last question in terms of planning, it is difficult. I mean, we've none of us really have faced something like this, and particularly as Amy said earlier, we've faced economic recessions before, but something that's driven by a health crisis is quite different. I think what we've tried to make sure is that we can be as flexible as we can be with the programmes of support that we have. So early on, when lockdown happened, we looked at all of the different offers that we had for businesses and how those could be refocused on what business were likely to need as a result of the pandemic. And I think that has to be our sort of modus operandi moving forward, to try and be flexible in the support that we've got. In some respects, it's simple, isn't it, in terms of what businesses need? They need good information, they need access to markets and customers, they need skilled workforce. But we've got to have that flexibility to tweak what support is available. And also, I guess a key point for us at Business Durham and this kind of strategic role of the council is to make sure that we're aware of where those gaps are and that we're lobbying government or whoever it might be to make sure that where we spot there's a gap and a need that's not being met, that we do something about filling that. At the same time, as I mentioned in my presentation, really important that we keep our eye on the future and make sure that we don't lose sight of the opportunities that will be there, because we're so focused on dealing with the immediate challenge, and sometimes that can be a real juggling act, but something that we're trying to keep front of mind.
Thanks, Sarah. We've got one last question from Jim Atkinson, please.
Hi, good morning, Sarah. Good to see that there's some good news in there as well as the rough stuff. It was nice to hear my name mentioned as well. It gave me a chance to just put a bit of flesh on the bones of the question I came in with in the first place. Just to give you an example, a guy who I know is a contractor, he's a gas fitter, so he'll go into people's houses on a regular basis. Now, he'll be there for probably an hour. And while he's there, he'll get a COVID 20 questions review, you know, what are you allowed to do? Can you do this? Can you do that? What happens when you go next door? All of those types of questions. So from my point of view, and he has a phone handy that he's got there, right? So anything he can do to get a quick reply to something he doesn't know the answer. Somebody might say to them, I was just watching the television, can you do this, can you do that? And you can put him in a spot at times, but it also can be very, very helpful to him. So if you could look something up really quickly, or even a quick phone call, because it's a lot of use. They use the phones a lot between themselves when they kind of fix things, you know what I mean? And it massively moves things on. So that's pretty much where I was going at. These people on a daily basis need as much information as they can, but because they're so busy, and because somebody like that is a perfect example of the type of questioning he can get. If they can jump on a phone and get an answer to a question quickly, anything we can do quickly for these people is going to be really, really useful. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we'd be happy to, if you wanted to direct that to Business Durham's inquiry line, we'd be very happy to respond on that, Jim. And I was just going to mention one other thing, just to pick up on one of the questions to Amy around support for the self-employed in particular. Just to say that through the Durham Business Opportunities Programme, we've launched a strand this month, which is particularly focusing on support for micro businesses. So that's people self-employed and employing up to 10 people, and it's very much around how they can find new customers, what they might need to do to support their marketing. So again, that's very much around how can we support those that are self-employed and need that bit of one-to-one advice, just to make sure that they're getting their business back on track.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for coming to our committee this morning with a further update. Really helpful information there. The recommendation is for members that we note and comment on the information provided in the report and during the presentation, and as part of the refresh of the committee's work programme for 21-22, receive a further progress update on activity undertaken by Business Durham, including support to aid recovery of the business sector resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. So we look forward to those updates in the future. Thanks very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Move now on to item number 8, which is Visit County Durham activity and support provided during the pandemic and recovery plans, pages 69 to 90 in your packs if you want to follow on there. And I'm delighted to welcome to present to us this morning the Managing Director of Visit County Durham, Michelle Gorman. So we'll invite you to present to us, please, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that's starting to come through now. Right. Show from the beginning. Okay, thank you. Hopefully you can all see my presentation, and good morning everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to attend this morning and present to you. So like Business Durham, this would have ordinarily been an annual update on destination performance and of the work of Visit County Durham, but obviously due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it's going to be a very update, and I'm going to be a very different update, and I'm going to be focusing on the impact of COVID-19 and the activity and support provided during the pandemic, and then also looking at those future recovery plans. So first of all, I'll start off with the destination performance, and we're looking back to 2019 here, but this impact statement is the facts and figures that we're actually using to calculate the actual impact of the pandemic on the visitor economy. So in 2019, we'll see that the economic value of the visitor economy was £955 million, and that was an increase of 1.9% on 2018. The biggest areas of expenditure were the food and drink and also indirect spend into the supply chain. This is similar to previous years. The jobs supported by tourism and the visitor economy, 9,720 are directly employed in tourism, with an additional 2,413 indirectly employed in the supply chain to the visitor economy. So we have a total jobs total of just over 12,000, which is up by 1.1% on 2018. And the Vale of Durham, which is comes down the middle of the county, that's where we have our main visitor products, so things like Beamish, Locomotion, and the Auckland project. We welcomed over 20 million visitors in 2019, and that was up by 2.1% on 2018. We welcomed 1.61 million overnight visitors and 18.52 million day visitors, and that split of day visitors to overnight visitors remains the same. We had 92% day visitors and 8% staying visitors, but you can see the average expenditure for an overnight visitor is significantly higher than that of the day visitor. Overnight expenditure is £190 per trip, whereas day visitor spend is £22 per trip. And I think I'd just like to note at this point that we had Visit County Durham and partners, we had revised and set an ambitious value target for the visitor economy of £1 billion by the end of 2020. And due to the devastating impact of COVID on the tourism sector, we know that this target in the 2025 timeframe is now unachievable. But we're very confident that had we not been facing a global pandemic in 2020, we would have achieved that £1 billion target. And that demonstrates to us that we were on the right track, and the investment, new developments, marketing and promotion of the county were making a positive difference. So if we come on to the impact of COVID-19 on the regional visitor economy, I think it's important to set it in that regional context. In my report, I cover off the sort of national picture as well. And you can see that regionally, tourism and the visitor economy is a significant sector again, with 73 million visitors coming to the region, with a contribution of £5 billion to the North East LEP area, and over 63,000 people employed before the start of the pandemic. All of the destinations in the North East LEP area use the same economic impact model as Visit County Durham, and that is STEAM. And we've used historic STEAM data from 2019 to forecast what the impact is likely to be. And we can see there that the impact is likely to be quite significant. So a 56% fall in economic impact from 5 billion to 2.2 billion. 48% fall in visitor numbers from 72 million to 38 million, and this will have a knock-on effect in terms of jobs. So we're expecting over 35 or almost 36,000 job losses. So going from 62,800 down to 26,900. And then if we use that same model and we look at the impact of COVID on County Durham's visitor economy, we've already seen that we had over 20 million visitors in 2019, with that £955 million spent in the local economy. So we're predicting, and this is September when we run this forecast, we're predicting a drop of 43.6% in visitor numbers. So down from 20 million to just over 11,000, which represents a loss of 8.77 million visitors. We're forecasting a drop of over 45% in spend in the local economy. So again, down from 95 million in 2019 to just over 520 million in 2020. Which is a loss of £434 million. And then both of these factors will have an impact on jobs, both direct and indirect jobs. and we're predicting a 46% fall in the number of jobs, which represents a significant loss of 5,587 jobs. I think it's important to state at this time that this is very much a short-term forecast, and it describes one possible outturn. I mean, it involves many assumptions and simplifications, and this is due to the fast-moving and uncertain nature of the COVID situation. So we will be revising that value target on a regular basis. The next revision will come sort of towards the end of the year, towards the end of November, December time. And again, we'll have more accurate data, which will help feed into this so we can be a bit more accurate in our forecasting. Amy, in her presentation, already referenced that we're surveying the businesses on a regular basis. We've just wave 5 of our business survey is currently open. That is due to close at the 31st of October, and the results from that will feed into our economic impact modelling. So what are we doing in terms of support for the sector? So we basically, when we went into lockdown, all of my team basically switched what they were doing into making sure that we were supporting our businesses as much as we possibly can and could. We're being responsive, and we're still have a significant team who are in regular contact with the industry. We're working in partnership. Sorry, excuse me. We're working in partnership with industry partners such as the County Durham Economic Partnership, Business Durham, many teams in Durham County Council, the North East Tourism Alliance, the LEP, various sectoral bodies such as the Tourism Management Institute, and then our national tourist boards of Visit England and Visit Britain. And we're sharing plans, we're sharing ideas, and we're making sure that information that is being given to us from our business community is fed back into up through those relevant channels. We're also monitoring the impact of COVID-19 on the sector. That is through our business surveying. My team undertake regular telephone calls for the businesses. So we've got a database of about 350 core businesses that we phone on a regular basis, normally to find out what the impact of various restrictions has had on their business, or looking ahead to see what future bookings are looking like. We also lobby for industry support, and we have regular email communications to the industry, signposting to official sources of support and advice, funding and grant programmes, and industry training that's delivered by partners. We have taken a joint communications approach, so members of my team work alongside members of Business Durham's teams, and also the corporate communications team, to make sure that our messaging is consistent and coherent, and we don't put out incorrect information, which is hugely important at this point. We have a COVID-19 content hub on our website, which is updated daily. I've already spoke about the calls that we undertake to businesses. We have a weekly e-newsletter which summarises some of the advice and support, but also looks at future opportunities and signposts to articles that we think that will help that visitor economy community. We've got B2B social media channels, which we're constantly sharing information throughout those channels. It's a lot more responsive. And we're running training programs and support, which is actually tailored to business needs. So those regular telephone calls to those businesses are hugely important, because we hear firsthand exactly what it is that they need from us in order to continue to trade. We have a strategic partner grouping. We have over sort of 20 strategic partners, and these are the larger businesses in the county, so the big hotels, the larger museums such as Beamish, the Bowes Museums. We've got transport providers that sit around that table too. We've got Newcastle Airport, we've got Arriva, we've got Go North East. We have landscape partnerships, so it is those businesses that can actually have an influence on what happens in the destination and very much influence our work. So through that process of our monthly meetings, we get anecdotal feedback and make sure that is also fed into the monitoring that we're doing and to the intelligence that we're feeding back into Durham County Council or up to the LEP or directly into government. We're hosting virtual networking meetings and giving businesses an opportunity to talk to each other, make those connections and see if there's synergies and areas where they can actually support each other. They've been really, really welcomed and you know, very supportive channels for the industry. We have a conference next week. It's going to be an online virtual conference. We're focusing on tourism of the future. We didn't want to run a conference that was looking at the impact of COVID on the sector. I think the sector knows what the impact is and is very much feeling it. So we're looking at tourism of the future. We've got UK Hospitality who are coming to speak. We've got Visit Britain have put forward a future trends organisation called Future Foresight, who's going to come and speak to the industry about potential trends in consumer behaviour and travel trends. And then I will also be doing a presentation on some of the work that we're undertaking behind the scenes to make sure that we, when we do have a bounce back and when people are allowed to travel, that we're there and we've got suitable product that will meet some of those changing consumer needs. Councillor Bolton touched on earlier on and asked if we're selling out outdoors. Very much so. I mean, appropriately. So as Amy mentioned in her response, we have to make sure that when we're marketing, we're mindful of any restrictions that are in place, and our messaging has to be very, very adaptable. Sometimes it's not appropriate to say come and visit Durham now, but it is appropriate for us to say, we've got fantastic outdoor space, please put us on your bucket list for a future visit. So outdoors has been identified as one of those future travel trends. So we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. So travel trade, in terms of international travel trade, obviously that has just disappeared, as has group travel. So we're making sure that we are speaking with those industry representative bodies. UK Inbound is the main body looking at international travel trade, and we've got coach and train representatives that are specifically tailored for that group travel. We're making sure that we've opened up that dialogue with them and with the industry to see if there's ways in which you can adapt that group travel offer, and there is ways that you can do it. And as already touched on, we're making sure that we've got an appropriate and responsive approach to destination marketing. Some of the campaigns that my team have delivered since we've been in the pandemic is, as I said, responding very much to what consumers can actually do, but also the changes in consumer behaviour. So when we first went into lockdown, the team very quickly developed a virtual visit campaign. So we had a virtual Durham visit on our website. Excuse me, and Amy also touched on the local resident campaign, which was called Explore From Your Door, which that campaign is ongoing. We're making sure that we're highlighting what is on your doorstep to the residents of County Durham, and we're making sure that we're covering each of the AAP areas, so we're not leaving anybody out. And our most recent campaign, which was a national campaign encouraging visits throughout the summer, was worth the wait. And we're still running that campaign, but we've changed the messaging ever so slightly. and that is now encouraging people to, as I said, dream of Durham and to put Durham on the bucket list for a future visit. That's it from me, thank you, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for that update, Michelle. Really appreciate it. Members, would any member like to speak to the presentation? Councillor Fraser Tinsley.
Thanks a lot, Chair. Thanks a lot for the presentation. Very comprehensive. I think the bottom line is visitors have halved, spends halved, and the amount of jobs in the sector's halved, and that's really worrying. But the important thing is, how do we get out of this? How do we get back? And really just a few questions. Are we now developing new marketing strategies based on what we anticipate the world's going to look like from 2021 onwards? For example, do we know what the breakdown of visitors into County Durham is in terms of Brits? So the whole concept of staycations would be more important, and non-Brits as well. So how many foreign visitors have gone to the county? It would be useful to know. And are we trying to tailor marketing strategies for them? Just one specific point I just picked up there. You talked about group visitors and particularly bringing in visitors from overseas, not just in groups as well. This is really important for language students, and I know that's an area we're looking at and developing in terms of Bishop Auckland and around things like that. I think the government have announced recently that they are proposing that after we leave the EU, you're not going to be able to travel in the UK with a European ID card. And people don't realise this, but a huge number of Europeans who have come to the UK in the past haven't used a passport. They've used an ID card. So if you need a passport, that's an extra £100 on top of your bill. And if you come as a family, that's extra £500, £400 or £500 for people travelling into the UK. I think it would be very wise if Visit County Durham were to lobby the government on this issue, because it's going to have a significant impact on foreign visitors, and I know that is important for our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Fraser. Can I bring in Tom Bolton, and then we'll give Michelle an opportunity to comment on those. Tom.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thanks to Amy and Michelle for answering the point I raised earlier. I live in Teesdale, and next door to my house is a holiday cottage, and it's been quite interesting to see, particularly since the lockdown was lifted, the number and different types of visitors that actually come and stay in the cottage. They tend to be families with younger children, or I would say more middle-aged couples, but usually with a dog or a couple of dogs. And one of the things I do notice, unfortunately, and this links to the visitor spend in the county in terms of visitors, is that often a lot of them bring their own food and drink and supplies. And I'm just wondering what the county council does in terms of its links with holiday cottage providers. Is there an association? Do we link into them? Are there ways that we could work with them to encourage visitors to the county to spend more money in the county, and things like, you know, getting the supplies locally rather than bringing stuff with them? Because that would provide a boost for our local shops and other service providers. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Michelle, do you want to those two?
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Tinsley, I'd just like to confirm that, yes, we are looking at new marketing strategies. I mean, I would say that consumer behaviour has changed, and I think that behaviour change is actually a permanent change. Hello, sorry. Can you hear me? I think I got.
Yeah, we lost you for a second, but
right. I got pushed out of the meeting there. I'm not quite sure what happened. Yes. So the consumer change, I think, is a permanent one, and I think that at the moment, certainly the sort of short to medium term trends in terms of what people are looking for is going to be the outdoors tourism. It's health tourism. It's activities and experiences that are very, very focused on friends and family. I mean, you know, I'm sure all of us have had restrictions around visiting friends and family during the pandemic. So that's going to be really important sort of post-pandemic and when a lot of the travel restrictions are lifted. Heritage and culture, our own heritage and culture is going to be very, very important to us. And that's, you know, I mean, we've got heritage, so that's something that we definitely need to capitalise on. We already do. So people are going to be looking for those staycations, and these are areas. So outdoors, heritage and culture, these are some of the main or key propositions for County Durham. So I think we're set to benefit from that. And also that green tourism, slow tourism, eco-tourism, that's going to be very, very important as well going forward. So in terms of a breakdown in sort of international and domestic visitors, so the North East doesn't really get too many international visitors from, if we look at international travel into the UK, the North East only welcomes about 3% of those visitors. So we have got, this is working with the North East Tourism Alliance and also with Visit Britain and Visit England to try and get international visitors away from London into the regions. There's lots of sort of development activity and marketing activity that we have been undertaking for the last couple of years and will continue to do so into the future to make sure that we benefit from those. And try and attract international visitors into the North East. I think we're very unknown as a region, but we've got, as I said, a number of initiatives, Northern Saints Trails being a sort of perfect example of where we can attract international visitors. European ID card, yes, we're lobbying with that. We work hand in hand with the Tourism Alliance, who lobbies directly into government on behalf of DMOs and destination management organisations, should I say, and on behalf of the tourism industry. And this has been on their radar for quite some time, and we're lobbying quite hard to make sure that we're not at a competitive disadvantage compared to other global destinations, which is in effect this is what will happen. So yes, very much so. And then Councillor Bolton, yes, it's great to hear that the holiday cottage in Teesdale has been busy, and yes, we do work with the accommodation providers across the whole of the county, and we do, as you have suggested, try to encourage that local food and drink. We have an initiative called Taste Durham, where we're promoting local suppliers and local producers as well, and also signposting to where you can buy that. It's actually quite a very difficult one, and it's an ongoing challenge that we have, and you know, I think there's so much more that we can do, but I think with that shift in consumer behaviour and you know, that more sort of local tourism, I think that, you know, there's an opportunity for us here to make more of our local produce. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer, Michelle, and for the questions from the councillors. We don't have anyone else registered to speak. Would anyone else like to speak to the report before we move on? Okay, thank you, colleagues. The recommendations are to note and comment on the information provided and include in our work programme for 21-22 a further progress update detailing the performance of Visit County Durham marked in the county, continued support delivered to the sector, and detail of future further recovery plans. So thanks again, Michelle, for attending this morning. We're going to move on now to agenda item number 9, which is the Q1 budget report. You can follow the presentation between pages 91 and 108 in our packs. And this morning we welcome Ian Herbison, Finance Manager of Resources and Regeneration, to present to us, please. So I'll hand over to Ian for your presentation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, what we've heard all morning from Amy, Sarah and Michelle is the impact of the pandemic. And clearly what you'll see in front of you today is the financial impact that it's having. and the services that are under the remit of this overview and scrutiny panel have been hit harder than most. And what I would like to thank is Amy and her team for the support. Obviously, we aren't in the office. We've been having meetings regularly to look at the finances, because what we found is we're engaging with officers who have been extremely busy because of the extra work and the impact of the virus has had in our response to that. But what I would like to say is, you know, the impact of the budget and the monitoring of the budget is also much more significant as a result, notwithstanding the fact that we have to do monthly returns to central government to report back what the financial impact has been. So what is really pleasing is that we were still able to show an underspend of 617,000 against a revised budget of 52 million. And in paragraph 4, what that does is it states the actual financial impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were forecasting at the first quarter that it would be 16.2 million of additional costs that we would have incurred, or actual income that we would have lost against the budget. That has been offset slightly by £4.2 million worth of savings due to mainly as a result of facilities being shut. And there's much more detail on those COVID-related costs and lost income and the savings shown in paragraphs 13 to 15. On the capital scheme, what I should have said, sorry, is the fact that that 16 million or the net 12 million is being funded corporately at the minute, either through central government grant or corporate reserves. So those COVID-related sums have been excluded from the forecast. From a point of view of capital, we had a revised capital budget of 75 million and expended to the first quarter to June of 11 million. Now, clearly that you would expect 25% to be spent, but because of the early stages of lockdown, it did mean that it did have an impact in our ability to deliver capital schemes. So again, as we go through the year, now it's moved to some degree of normality, if I could say that, is that the capital expenditure will start to go through at a different rate. The report does cover the details of the actual spend and forecast for each of the individual heads of service that report to this panel in paragraph 14. So that's all I really wanted to say on the report, Chair, but I'm more than happy to take any questions on anything that's detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Members might find it helpful to view the footage from the management board from yesterday, where Jeff Garford did a very detailed and frank report on the council's finances, and in addition to what Ian said, paints a very clear picture of the situation. But what concerns me is it doesn't include necessarily a lot of COVID stuff, because a lot of it's uncertain. So I think what we do need is very much need a sort of fair settlement from the government to be very clear on what we're getting, so we can plan our services, because like I think Councillor Tinsley mentioned yesterday, it's all very much educated guesswork, which is often very accurate, but it's still guesswork, and that makes me very uncertain given the challenges that we've heard about today in all of our other presentations. Would anyone like to speak to that report or have a question for Ian at this point? It's obviously a fantastic presentation, Ian. Everyone's taken it as is. So thank you very much for visiting us this morning and presenting to us.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Obviously, the recommendation for us is to note the contents of the report, which of course we will. We'll now move on to item number 10, which is the Q1 performance report. And presenting to us this morning is Tom Gorman, the Corporate Scrutiny and Strategy Manager. Sorry, and we'll invite Tom to give your presentation, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I don't have to introduce myself now. The purpose of this report is to present progress in achieving the key outcomes of the Council's performance management framework as fall under the remit of this committee. And like Ian, I would like to thank the staff in the various services covered by this report for the cooperation in collecting performance information for this report at a time when they've had probably lots of other things on the plate. Due to the temporary suspension of council meetings, this report covers 2 quarters, being January to March last year and the first quarter of the current year up to 30th of June 2020. Obviously, the COVID pandemic has heavily impacted on the economy, as we've heard through all of the reports this morning, really. I think it's worth reminding ourselves of some of the key dates that heavily influenced performance in the first quarter. Firstly, lockdown on the 23rd of March, when the government introduced regulations to prevent the spread of the virus, which effectively was a kind of stay-at-home order and only allowed people to leave their house for very restricted legitimate purposes allowed by law. Lockdowns gradually eased throughout quarter one, as this performance report covers. One of the key dates for the local economy being the 15th of June, when high streets and retail parks and shopping centres and the likes were reopened, so-called non-essential shops, if you like. And it wasn't until the end of this, well, after the end of this quarter, on the 4th of July, when the hospitality sector, pubs and restaurants and so forth, were permitted to reopen. So those are the kind of the backdrop against the performance within this report. Nationally, the UK suffered the biggest slump on record, with GDP falling by 20.4% over the April to June period. That's the largest of any G7 nations, I believe, and it was the second consecutive fall in GDP. This means that the UK is officially in a recession now, first one in 11 years. Interestingly, you know, the biggest contraction in the economy on record, I just had a quick look to see when records began, because sometimes, you know, they start like in 1997 or something, but actually GDP records go back to 1706. So I can comfortably say this is the biggest contraction in the economy in our lifetime. The fall has been sudden and dramatic, and some of the national official performance indicators that we routinely use in our quarterly performance reports have had a significant time lag on them. Nonetheless, they show some sort of trend, but they've become less useful because this has happened very suddenly and very dramatically, as I've said. We've recognised this, and we've attempted where possible to develop our own experimental statistics to give members a bit more of a sort of up-to-date picture of where we think we are at the moment in the absence of current national figures, if you like. So turning to the report itself, this follows the same format as in previous reports. We're reporting against ambitions within the council plan, which was agreed at council last week. And our key performance questions. So moving on to, do residents have good job prospects? Employment is one of those areas that I've just mentioned where official statistics don't give us a true picture where we're at the moment. There's a 3-month time lag on employment rate, and it's a rolling 12-month average figure. So we're unlikely to see the true impact for a couple of quarters at least. So what we've done, we've developed our own estimates using labour force survey data, which comes out monthly, albeit at a regional level, but it is more up to date. So we've applied the regional changes to our county employment rate, and we estimate the employment in the county is at 70.9% for June 2020, and that's below the regional and national rates. The effect of COVID-19, of course, is sort of masked because of the support packages that the government have put in place for employed and self-employed people. I think Amy mentioned 64,000 jobs. Around a third of jobs were furloughed under the government's job retention scheme. Latest indications are for Q2 that's actually increased a little bit by about 5,000. In addition to the furlough scheme, the self-employed income support scheme, there's about 14,000 people have claimed that, representing 71% of our self-employed people in the county. And since Q1, the numbers have increased in that area as well by about 800 people. And of course, the furlough scheme comes to an end tomorrow, so we won't really know the impact until next month and thereafter. So we're undertaking work to estimate the potential impact on unemployment rate using a number of scenarios based on previous recessions, and which these scenarios suggest that unemployment could rise to about 27,000 by March 2021. and that's from around 14,000 in December 2019. Looking at redundancies, the British Chamber of Commerce found nationally that 13% of respondents to one of their surveys have made redundancy since the start of the crisis, and another 33% are intending to make redundancies over the next months. And in Q1, the national redundancy rate rose. The latest figures suggest it's 8.2 per 1,000 employees, and that compares with 4.4 in the previous year. So it's doubled, nearly doubled anyway. Between March and May, we saw an increase in claimant count rate, universal credit claimant count. As Amy mentioned, the claimant count rose from 5.1% in March to 8.2% in June. That's sort of in line with regional and national trends, and it has remained static since that sort of dramatic increase. But I suppose the big headline here is there's been an increase of 74% in universal credit claims for people aged 18 to 24 compared to June 2019. So it's disproportionately affected young people. The report also mentions it's disproportionately affected women as well. So there's some equality impacts as well as on the general population. In response to the impact on the economy, working with DWP, we've launched Job Fuse, which supports employers and helps individuals with jobs being affected as the result of COVID-19, and additional resources available through that scheme to triage those people who've lost their jobs, furloughed, or are in fear of any job losses. Is County Durham a good place to do business? The next sort of key performance question in our report. A lot of this was covered by Sarah's presentation, but just to mention, ONS do a regular survey of businesses nationally. Latest figures for this quarter is that 7% of industries have temporarily closed or paused trading, and almost 15% report that their turnover has decreased by more than 50%. There was a local survey undertook by Business Durham, the results of which are presented in the report. A few presenters have mentioned it's not all bad news. I think Amy mentioned house sales and home improvements are up. And there has been some business diversification. I think we're all aware of shops that have started delivery services, and many restaurants have developed takeaway and delivery services as a result of the pandemic. And there are some specific examples in the report of diversification and expansion leading to job creation. There's a company called GSB Enterprises in Bishop Auckland, which manufactures cartons that's diversified into PPE production. And there's a Seaham-based company that's won a contract under the Test and Trace programme, creating an additional 170 jobs. So there's companies that are doing well at the moment. Looking at our high streets, work was undertaken during the quarter in the report to coordinate the reopening of town centres, looking at measures in place around roads and footpaths and sort of pinch points and bottlenecks within our towns and the city centre itself. Leaflets were distributed to town centres, premises, and on how to open safely and some of that regulation and guidance. And we delivered webinars to the retail sector as well. We've undertaken town centre surveys in this quarter, and I think Amy mentioned that the picture for them is mixed, with some town retail centres seeing an increase in vacancies and temporary closures, shops that still haven't opened yet, but there are some that it's affected less so. I think members might have seen in the press, Durham City was sort of earmarked as the 4th worst in the country for shop vacancies, behind York, Newcastle and Worcester, I think it was. So there's some issues, and Durham City is flagged up as one of them. I think from the town centre surveys, one of the things that we've noticed is where there's a larger proportion of shops that are part of national retail chains, they've been more badly affected, and Durham City is an example of that. The likes of M&Co and Hotter Shoes and things like that that have closed within the city. In terms of business support activity, we've distributed grants totaling 100 million to around 9,000 businesses, and we've issued business rate reductions to a number of businesses as well, of totaling more than £49 million. Just under 2,300 businesses accessed business rates reductions. There's also been an additional scheme for small businesses who aren't liable for business rates, who don't have a business premise, if you like. That's an extra £5 million, which was introduced in June, and that's benefited 300 businesses in the first month. Sarah also mentioned that Business Durham's engaged with over 650 businesses around COVID throughout the start of the pandemic. On the question of how well do tourism and cultural events contribute to the local economy, I think Michelle's more than covered off that question in a presentation and covered most of the performance information that's contained within this report. In terms of do residents have access to decent and affordable housing, I think due to the COVID restrictions have resulted in temporary construction site closures, which has impacted on the number of new homes completed. That's went down significantly in this quarter. Presentations to housing solutions have dropped by 17%, but we are expecting an increase once the eviction ban is lifted towards the end of the year and mortgage payment holidays disappear. 77% of our preventions where household available to stay in the home were addressed through discretionary housing payments put in place, and we've introduced a Stop Before You service scheme in response to when the eviction ban has been lifted, and I think more detail will follow in the session that you have planned later in your work programme around a housing specific theme that you're looking at. In response at the start of the pandemic to the homeless situation, 36 rough sleepers were placed in temporary accommodation during the first 48 hours of lockdown as well. Is it easy to travel around the county? Our last performance question covered some of this already. Park and Ride has been closed in response to the pandemic. It reopened on the 29th of June. Bus companies are operating around 50% capacity, as mentioned in Amy's presentation. Bus companies have also reported a 10% fall in patronage and reduced availability of bus drivers. I know from media that bus drivers are a particular sort of sector of workers, if you like, who've been affected by COVID themselves, and a lot of fallen with infections and stuff. So that's something else that bus companies have reported to us. I think that concludes the things that I've highlighted, Chair, and I'd just like to open it up for questions if there is any.
Thanks, Tom. I've got a couple of comments to make. You might have to mute your mic because I'm getting an echo. Just in relation to the infographic on page 116, obviously the stat that stuck out a mile to me was the unemployment, the forecast that we looked at about potentially going up from 14,000 to 24 or 27,000. Are you aware of the current figures in relation to the employability programs, or could we get them at some point? Because clearly those are going to be key in helping people, you know, who've lost their job get back into work. We just hope there's the jobs there for them to get. That'll be really helpful. And the other point was in relation to the DABs, which is the Durham Ambitious Business Startup Scheme. Schemes like that are going to be vital. So in helping businesses, and in relation to registered businesses, obviously the stats, as we know, a lot of this stuff is a little bit out of date given what's happened since COVID hit us. But it would be interesting to see the stats on registered businesses since COVID to keep aware of how that's going. I'll tell you what I'll do as well. I will invite Rob Crute to ask his question, make his comments, and then you can come back in, Tom, if that's okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful of the time, so I'll be as brief as possible. I'm Rob Crute. I represent the Blackhall ward. I'm also Chairman of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. Tom, I note that we've been making inroads into highway repairs. I know there's quite the hefty highways repairs backlog. We're starting to make inroads into that, but do we have any data on footpath repairs as well? And I ask that question for two particular reasons. First, of course, connected communities is one of the priorities in the county's vision. But secondly, we're learning lately from health colleagues that along with mental health, obesity is emerging as one of the key factors in contracting coronavirus. And I think we need to be doing as much as we can as a county in keeping those communities as open as possible between each other. I think the problem that we have with damaged footpaths, I mean, certainly it'll be the case if my position's any example to go by, it'll be more of an issue in rural areas, because I think it's been exacerbated in some ways by the unintended consequences of the street lighting and energy reduction policy, where in some areas we have separate communities, they're kept apart by footpaths that are in a good condition. That's made even worse by darkness. I think the street lighting policy may be a separate issue. I was more interested at the moment in if we had any data on footpath repairs and what progress we are making towards that to try and address that problem of obesity and also meet our requirement to keep our communities connected within the county vision.
Thanks, Rob. Tom, before you come in, I'll just invite Richard Manchester to make his comments, and he can come in on all three. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one. The number of people accessing housing solutions is down for the time being, but as you said, due to the measures implemented by government, such as the ban on evictions. However, I'm just wondering, do we have enough capacity in the system for the expected in terms of housing supply, spare accommodation, as those measures start to be rolled back?
Thank you, Richard. Tom, do you want to comment on those issues that we've raised?
Yes, Chair, thanks. In terms of unemployment, obviously, from a performance perspective, I guess unemployment is one of those things that, unlike the likes of planning applications and pothole repairs, where it's not purely within the remit of the council to address. And some of the schemes that you mentioned, we do in partnership, and I think Amy mentioned the Agile Economic Recovery Plan that we're developing. I haven't got the figures on employability programs and the DAB program, and I can certainly circulate those to you and the rest of the membership of the committee after the meeting. But I think we've got to look at, is that enough, and do we need to introduce new schemes and new initiatives and projects? And I certainly know that's part of that resilience plan that we are developing in partnership with other agencies in the public sector, the private sector and the voluntary sector, and that might be something that this scrutiny committee will want to look at once that plan's been developed. In terms of Councillor Cruth's question on footpaths, yes, we do have statistics. I don't have them personally, but I know we've got across highways, we've got statistics on all sorts of things. One of the things around footpaths, I know that we do have a massive backlog, 179 million, according to our performance report for the latest data that we have. So we do have to prioritise highways and footpaths and all of the other things that fall into that budget. So it'd be interesting, as you say, if the priorities have changed as a result of COVID-19 and people needing to get out more and exercise, etc. So I'll certainly get some figures on that. And again, with Councillor Manchester's question on capacity, we're trying to estimate what the impact of the eviction ban will be. Will it be a tidal wave of people coming forward? And the only thing that we had to go on last time that I talked to the service was sort of previous historical data, and it may be that it's greater than that there's a potential in there. So I think it's probably best to speak to the service and get back to you on whether those estimates have been firmed up somewhat. I would dare say that some of the figures that I've seen, capacity will be a big issue. And I know we've increased capacity recently through a number of regional initiatives, but I'm just wondering whether capacity will be a significant issue, looking at some of the figures that have been bandied around in terms of people that are affected once that eviction ban has been lifted.
Thank you, Tom. I note in the comments, Councillor Adam, who's the chair of the Environment Scrutiny Committee, has said that roads and footpaths performance will be available at the Scrutiny Environment Committee meeting of 16th of November, so that'll be getting covered there. Does any other member wish to make any comments? I have a hand up from Stephen Gwilym. Do you want to come in, Stephen?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just to make reference to the fact that we do have a further meeting that's been referenced earlier in the meeting in December, which is very much a housing focused meeting, which will include information around housing solutions. I just would refer the queries that Councillor Manchester raised to that meeting, as well as seeking information in the meantime. So it could be a further line of inquiry that we advise our colleagues in Housing Solutions about, and ask for some specific information around that to be presented at that committee. And also at around that time, we may well be in the middle of understanding the potential impact of that lifting of the evictions ban. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Stephen. I'm sure that'll be really, really helpful. Would any other member like to speak to the report? Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for giving us that and answering those questions. And obviously we have some things to take away to get afterwards. The recommendation is that we consider the overall position and direction of travel in relation to Q1, the impact of COVID-19 on performance, the actions being taken to address areas of underperformance, including the significant economic and wellbeing challenges because of the pandemic. And I think all the presentations that we've had this morning touch upon that in some way. Item number 11, can I take this opportunity to thank all of you members and officers for your time this morning. I have not been informed of any other business, so can you remain in place until the broadcast ends, and that concludes the meeting this morning. Thank you.